You're standing on a wall of limestone and mud brick, 5 meters thick, on a hill in northwestern Anatolia. Below you, the fires start again, hundreds of them, then thousands. Same as last night, same as the night before, same as 10 years of nights before that. You were a child when those ships landed on the beach. You're not a child anymore. The men down there have built huts. They've buried their own dead in that soil. They've been camped so long that the plain belongs to them now, and the wall under your feet hasn't moved an inch. So how are these walls still standing? How did a single city hold off an entire army for 10 years? One thing first, because it changes how you hear everything else. The 10-year siege comes from the Iliad, Homer's epic poem, composed roughly 4 centuries after the Bronze Age it describes. It is literature, not a record. But Troy is real. There's a hill in Turkey called Hisarlik, and buried inside it are 9 cities stacked on top of each other from about 3000 BCE onward. Real walls, real gates, real burn layers, real arrowheads. So from here on, everything gets a label. Myth from Homer and Greek legend, or dirt from the archaeologists who dug the hill. 2 different kinds of true. Don't let anyone blur them for you. Here's what a long siege actually does to a city. The granaries go first, then the livestock, then whatever people were hiding under the floorboards. Water gets rationed, then rationed again. Waste piles up inside a space designed for a fraction of the people now crammed into it. Disease moves through the crowd faster than any army could. The walls don't fall, they erode. Mud brick cracks, and nobody goes outside to fix it, because outside is where the enemy is, and morale goes last and fastest. Somebody always opens a gate. That's the unromantic truth of ancient sieges. Most of them end from the inside. Most Bronze Age and Iron Age sieges lasted weeks, sometimes months. A siege that ran for years was rare enough that the ancient world remembered the names. 10 years is not a siege. 10 years is a lifestyle. According to the Iliad, the Greeks didn't send a raiding party. They sent a coalition. Homer devotes an entire section of the poem, the catalogue of ships, to listing the contingents that sailed, kingdom by kingdom, captain by captain. It reads like a muster roll of the whole Greek world. Label that clearly. Those numbers are epic poetry. They're a literary device, almost certainly inflated, and no archaeologist treats them as a head count. But the idea underneath is the point. In the story, Troy is outnumbered by the combined manpower of an entire civilization, 1 city against a continent's worth of ships. By every rule of war, Troy should have fallen in year 1. It didn't. So let's look at the reasons, the mythical ones and the ones you can still touch. Dirt first. The city most scholars point to as Homer's Troy is the layer called Troy 6, standing from roughly 1750 to 1300 BCE. Its fortifications were about 5 meters thick and stood up to 8 meters high. The lower section was a sloping base of cut limestone blocks, sloped deliberately because a sloped face is brutally hard to undermine and even harder to lean a ladder against. On top of that stone base sat a mud brick superstructure, multiple towers, 5 gateways, each one narrow and awkward on purpose. This wasn't one build. It was centuries of rebuilding, each generation adding to what the last one left. Now the myth. In Greek legend, those walls weren't built by Trojans at all. The story says Poseidon and Apollo raised them, working a year of forced labor for King Laomedon, and that Laomedon then refused to pay them. That is mythology. Full stop. It's a story ancient Greeks told to explain why the walls looked impossible, but it tells you something real anyway. Those fortifications were so far beyond normal that people needed gods to account for them. Troy sits on a hill overlooking the Dardanelles, the Hellespont, the narrow strait connecting the Aegean to the Sea of Marmara, and, beyond it, the Black Sea. That is not a coincidence, and it's not decoration. The current runs against you. The winds run against you. Bronze Age ships regularly had to wait at that entrance for conditions to turn, which means Troy sat on top of a natural bottleneck where the ancient world's shipping had no choice but to stop. Manfred Korfmann, who excavated Hisarlik from 1988 until his death in 2005, argued this made Troy a serious commercial power, not a village. And his team found a lower city outside the citadel, plus a defensive ditch cut into the bedrock to stop chariots and slow an assault before it ever reached the wall. His estimate of Troy's size is disputed. The archaeologist Frank Kolb argued publicly that Korfmann had oversold it. Label that honestly. Contested. The geography isn't. High ground, steep approach, a wall on top. Attacking that uphill in bronze armor is a bad day at every hour of it. Cut a city off from water, and you don't need to fight it. You just wait. Between 1997 and 2001, Korfmann's team documented an underground water system beneath the site. An artificial tunnel network running roughly 160 meters with vertical shafts, the tallest reaching about 17 meters. It goes back to around 2600 BCE. It collected and channeled water from inside the defenses. And here's the detail that gives archaeologists goosebumps. A Hittite treaty between King Muwatalli II and Alexandru of Wilusa being the Hittite name most scholars identify with Troy, lists divine witnesses. Among them, the underground watercourse of the land of Wilusa, a tunnel in the ground, and a text written by a different empire that treats that tunnel as a god. On the myth side, in the Iliad, Troy is not alone. Allied contingents from across Anatolia keep arriving throughout the poem. That's the story's answer to how a besieged city kept eating. Treat it as narrative, but understand what it implies. Homer's siege was never an airtight blockade. It was a pjed holding a line, with the back door never fully shut. This is the part that gets skipped, and it might be the most important. In the late Bronze Age, the technology to knock down a wall like Troy's essentially did not exist. No catapults. The first true catapult was developed under Dionysius I of Syracuse around 399 BCE, roughly 800 years after the traditional date for Troy's fall. Sophisticated siege towers, standardized battering rams, engineered assault ramps. Those belonged to the Assyrians and later, centuries down the line. An army in front of Troy had ladders, fire, arrows, and patience. So the siege in the story isn't a siege the way you're picturing it. There's no engineering, there's no breach, there's a camp on a beach, raids on the countryside, and a wall nobody has the tools to remove. No catapults, no siege towers, just a wall and time. That alone can turn a campaign into a decade. Pure myth here, and it matters that you know it. In the Iliad, Troy's defense has a face. Hector, Priam's eldest son, the one who goes out to fight when nobody else will, who knows the city falls when he does, and who says so out loud before he goes. There is no archaeological evidence for Hector. No inscription, no tomb, no name in any Hittite tablet. He is a character in a poem, but he's doing a job in that poem, explaining the thing walls can't explain. Stone doesn't hold a city. People holding stone hold a city. And people need a reason to still be standing there in year 9. So how does it end? In the myth, not with force. With a trick. The wooden horse. The Greeks fake a retreat, leave an offering, and the Trojans open their own gate and pull it inside. 10 years of walls, undone by one afternoon of wanting the war to be over. Note what that story is really saying. The walls never failed. The people did. In the dirt, it's messier and more interesting. Carl Blegen, excavating in the 1930s, concluded that the Troy 6 city was destroyed by an earthquake, not an army. Most scholars now accept that, and pottery analysis dates it to around 1300 BCE. The next city, Troy 7a, built on the ruins by survivors, is the one that shows violence. Burning, sling stones, human remains left unburied in the streets. Storage jars sunk into the floors of cramped houses. The signature of a population packed inside the walls, hoarding. That destruction dates to roughly 1210 to 1190 BCE. And there's a hypothesis, not a finding, that the two memories got fused. That folk tradition merged an earthquake that flattened a legendary city with a later sack, and that the horse itself is a garbled memory of the earthquake. God. Poseidon, in Greek religion, is the earthshaker. He is also the god of horses. It's an elegant idea. It is also unproven, and serious scholars disagree about it. Do not take it as settled. What the ground does say clearly is this. Troy's walls stood for centuries, and when the city finally ended, the wall was not what gave way first. Troy proved for 10 years that walls could hold back an army. What they couldn't hold back was the moment everyone inside stopped being afraid.